Chapter 84. Trapped in. No mortal human being ever before had dared to debate a Muslim scholar in the Middle East as Inaz had done. Her daring action, just like that of a Muslim apostate girl who had gone to the Islamic Caliphate in Syria and debated the Caliph Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, and thought she could still survive after she had said all those accusations against Islam and its founder, Prophet Muhammad. For Inaz to survive after saying all those ugly allegations against the beautiful religion of peace, and the master of creation, she needed the angel of God to descend from heaven and open the gate of the bottomless pit and take her out of hell and fly her in wings of eagle and soar high in the sky and drop her in the paradise of the promised land, the land that flows with honey and money. But, no power or authority on earth could rescue her from those thousands of angry Muslim rioters. Neither the UN nor the International Criminal Police of the Interpol could get her alive out of the Middle East. An Arab high-ranking police officer leaked to the media the name of the hotel where the accursed blasphemous Sudanese apostate girl was hiding. Accordingly, it was too late when Inaz realized that she had dug her own grave. She felt like she had been cast into a deep, immeasurable space, gulf, or cavity, vast chasm, an abyss. Her hotel was surrounded by angry Muslim protesters, of whom the majority were dangerous terrorists. The hotel was guarded by Arab Muslim police officers. Every one of those Muslim police officers had watched the debate in Al Jazeera TV and more or less had the same feeling of antagonism towards the apostate girl who dared to land in a Muslim country and speak those defaming accusations against the master of creation and the one and only one true religion in the whole universe. The fact that she was a woman made them to hate her the more. They believed that Satan had climbed over her and possessed her from head to feet. Therefore, they concluded that, if such a satanic female creature was allowed to live and go to the West, she would speak more lies about their beautiful religion of Islam and defame the good and aromatic sierra of the master of creation. Accordingly, they determined to cut her tongue, chop off her 10 fingers, blind her eyes, and deafen her ears. They decided to mutilate her that she would never ever be able to function as human being again. They wanted either to kill her or turn her into vegetable. The United Nations office in New Delhi found itself helpless in the case of the Sudanese refugee girl who dared to attack Muslims in their land. The UN office could neither condemn her for the debate nor revoke her refugee status. But, they could do nothing to help her. Inaz received international support from many people in the Western countries. They wanted her to be rescued from those angry Arab Muslims. Her video by then had reached a new record of over 1 billion views and 20 million comments. Only the videos of American popular singers could come close to that new record. People wrote extensively under that YouTube video. Thousands of suggestions were given in how the trapped Sudanese apostate girl should be rescued from the deadly jaws of Islam. Since Qatar had the biggest American military base in the Middle East, Al Udeid Air Base, the U.S. Air Force should fly some Marines in their choppers and send them to rescue Inaz from those Muslim rioters. This military operation might involve high risk for Inaz and also for the hotel staff and its guests, still it worth trying. Yet another suggestion proposed to use instead of the American Marines, the UN peacekeeping troops. Other groups suggested to change the entire hotel management and staff and replace them by foreigners from some Western countries. The holders of this suggestion were worried that one of the Muslim employees might be led by the zeal for his or her Islamic religion, hide poison in Inaz's food or attack her inside her room and strangle her to death. Furthermore, the holders of this suggestion demanded also the changing of the Arab Muslim police officers who were guarding the hotel. Some of them might be moved by the same reason and hence rush inside the hotel and spray bullets on the staff and guests, indiscriminately killing them all along with the apostate girl. Many more suggestions were proposed, some were practical and some were impossible to perform without exposing Inaz to high risk. While the outside world trying to find a safe exit for her, Inaz was going through the most horrifying days and nights in her life. She regretted her hasty and unthoughtful decision to debate a Muslim scholar in a Muslim country. She remembered how the Muslim Sudanese students had violently reacted in that pseudo-debate in Bombay, which resulted into a fatal disaster. Although she didn't participate in it, still she was made to pay a high price because her name was used without her presence. Due to that pseudo-debate, she was falsely accused, arrested, and forcibly extradited from India to Sudan. But now, she was willingly and actually participated in a real debate, therefore, she had passed the death sentence on her life. Meanwhile, Inaz was sitting all alone in her room and watching the developments of her case. Through the TV, she understood, the UN office was facing a serious problem regarding her rescue. Unless a deadly battle was fought between the angry Muslim protesters and the Muslim police authority, there would be no safe passage for her. Many people would have to die and many more would have to suffer, but the Qatar Muslim government would not allow such catastrophe to befall its citizens for the sake of rescuing a single refugee girl. And that girl was an apostate from Islam and a blasphemer. In those difficult days and nights, Inaz had not forgotten God. She was continuously praying and petitioning her good Lord for her rescue. She also knew that her lover and dear husband would be praying for her too. She was missing him so much. She wished he was by her side inside that prison-like hotel room. She remembered how courageously he offered his life for her defense when her terrorist father came to behead her at the seashore of the Marine Drive. Inaz was also missing her lovely baby Grace very much. She could forget every evil happened to her except the evil those heartless Indian female police officers had done to her when they snatched her sleeping baby from her lap and took her away. No matter how much she cried and begged and how much her baby cried, those stony hearts remained unmoved. Inaz tried desperately to figure out an escape, but she felt she was trapped in an unpleasant situation, and she could not escape from it. There was no a young Muslim woman near her that she could attack, strangle, and rob her black burqa and escape. Even if she managed to run away from the hotel, where should she go and how could she hide from the Muslim people? Moreover, how could she escape out of the state of Qatar without her Sudanese passport and air ticket? Inaz thought of cutting her hair short and dressing up as boy as she did in Riyadh City and then running from the hotel. But, who was going to give her male clothes? She would face the same problem she had faced in Saudi Arabia, if she was caught dressing up as a young man in a male-dominating country as Qatar. Inaz understood that she had run out of all her tricks and lucks. Therefore, she gave up trying and surrendered herself to her fate. Chapter 85. Welcome back, Teresa. Teresa Alexander arrived at Chhatrapati Shivaji International Airport after a long and exhausting trip. She had a small bag, which she was pulling behind her. She had no other luggage to wait for. She was carrying inside her handbag a few traveling checks in US dollars and a couple of thousand of Indian rupees. In her hand, she was carrying her passport and a small form which she filled when she was inside the Air India plane. She was traveling alone. She looked tense and frightened. She stood in one of the Indian police check-up queue. It was long queue. 99% of the passengers in that long line were carrying Indian passports like hers. They were all looked very happy and chatting loudly to each other in Hindi. Some of them tried to engage her in their friendly banter, but she just smiled and declined their offer in a friendly gesture. It seemed she was the only one among them. She wasn't happy to be back in her motherland. Moreover, every one of them was pushing in front of him a cart which had 2 to 3 huge bags. Each bag could carry inside it 2 human beings. She was the only Indian passenger who had not brought with her many gifts for her relatives, friends, and neighbors. Teresa began to sweat and shake as soon as she stood face to face with the Indian police authority at the Bombay International Airport. A female police officer saw the fear in her face and began to ask her many questions. She was trying to ascertain the reason which filled the heart of the Indian young woman with such dread. She thought, Teresa Alexander was smuggling drugs or gold in her luggage. Therefore, she snatched her small bag from her hand and started to search it in and out. When she didn't find anything hidden inside the small bag, she asked Teresa to come around the counter. She then took her inside a small room and asked her to remove all her clothes including her underwear and bra. There were other two huge Indian female police officers inside the searching room. The three cops searched every inch of Teresa's naked body, but couldn't find the drugs concealed inside. They knew Teresa had already passed through the body's screening and there was nothing detected hidden inside her stomach. They had also thoroughly checked her hair and mouth, but could not find the object of their search. Finally, they were left with no reason to detain her. They let her go. Nonetheless, all three police officers suspected that there was something not right with Teresa Alexander, but they couldn't figure it out. After going through that intensive police search, Teresa's heart began to beat normally and she felt she had another narrow escape. Her first experience was even more worse than this one. At the international airport from where she started her trip, the police authority found a discrepancy between her traveling documents and her looks. Firstly, she was carrying an Indian passport, but she didn't look like an Indian girl. She also could not speak Hindi or any other Indian language. India has 17 official languages, but Teresa could speak none of them. Moreover, India would never give a foreigner citizenship even if he was born and brought up in the Indian soil. The restriction came as the result of the population explosion. Teresa didn't look like Indian, she didn't speak any Indian language, she looked like an Arab girl, and she spoke fluent Arabic. The female police officer who made that observation was from an Indian background. After asking her 101 question, and finding no specific reason to block her trip, the Arab police authority allowed her to join her flight to Bombay. As soon as she emerged out of the arrival hall, Teresa felt great relief when she saw her brother and her sister-in-law were waiting for her just in front of the crowded entrance. Mary ran and threw her hands around Teresa and passionately hugged her. The two Indian girls began to weep out of joy. Mr. Vijay Alexander separated his wife and sister and requested them to follow him in silence. He strictly warned them from saying anything to each other while they were moving in public. After long walking and pushing their way out, the silent trio reached the place where Mr. Alexander's Mercedes car was parked. The chauffeur was sitting inside the air-conditioned car and reading his newspaper. Mr. Alexander knocked the window glass. The driver put down his paper and came out quickly and opened the car doors for the Alexanders. Mr. Alexander sat in the passenger's seat while Mary and Teresa occupied the back seats. Immediately, the beautiful car began to build up speed and in short time, the driver started to battle his way across the packed streets of the metropolitan city. "Welcome back, Teresa," Mr. Alexander said happily. Chapter 86. The Happy Trip. Inaz, Joseph, and their cute baby Grace Abraha arrived at the New Delhi General Railway Station after a happy and comfortable trip. It took the Rajdhani Express train 14 hours to cover a distance their former Dehradun train covered in 36 hours. During their wonderful journey, they ate delicious Indian food which was served to them by the train attendants. They also watched a nice Indian movie with English subtitles. From the railway station, the happy family took a taxi to the YMCA. Their double bedroom had already been booked a few days before their trip. They received their room key from a beautiful Indian girl. Their spacious room was divided into two sections, bedroom and living room. Besides that, they had a small kitchen and big washroom. In the living room, there was 70 inches TV fixed on the wall. They also had a sofa and a love seat. There was a carpet in both rooms. The happy family felt that they were in a 5-star hotel. Of course, the lovers remembered those miserable days they spent in that southern Sudanese doghouse. That Sudanese hotel was worse than a dungeon. They also recollected how they used to sleep on the solid ground without mattress or pillows. Moreover, they remembered how they used to eat with their hands, without forks or knives, that once-in-a-day meal. But now, they were allowed to have 3 meals, which would be served to them in their room. Their meals were already paid for on the day their booking was made. The happy family spent the rest of the day in their beautiful room. They had 2 delicious meals and watched a couple of American movies before they retired to their comfortable bed. They slept in each other's arms after they had wonderful intimacy which culminated in earth-shattering love-making. Their lovely Grace slept in a baby bed provided by the YMCA staff. On the following day, the lovers had joined hot bath before they had their breakfast. After the breakfast, the happy family took a taxi and traveled to the main office of the United Nations. They had no prior booking or a scheduled interview. They just came in. Inez presented herself at the wicket gate of heaven and wrote a short note and then gave it to one of the security guards. She then requested him to pass it to her legal representative. Instead of a positive or negative reply, the highest authority in the UN office came in person to receive her and her family. The first 2 questions she was asked: how did she manage to escape from the hotel she was trapped in at Doha City, and how did she find her way back to India? Inez declined to answer either question. She encountered with her own questions: was she still a refugee, and was she still allowed to live in India? Her new legal representative responded in the affirmative to her both questions. Since she had been given a green light, Inez demanded to be sent for resettlement in a Western country as soon as possible along with her family. Her legal representative once again acquiesced. He promised to send a reminder to the Canadian embassy. During her incarceration in the Middle East, her papers were sent to the Canadian Authority for Resettlement. The Canadian embassy had approved her request and granted her landing immigrant visa. Due to her critical problem in Doha City, the UN office didn't find a safe exit to extract her out of the hotel and send her to Canada. But now, since she had decided to include her spouse and child, the UN office must submit a new request. Inez's sudden appearance made everyone in the UN office to scratch his head. The last news they heard about her, she was mysteriously disappeared from the hotel at Doha and no one knew where she went. Neither the hotel management nor the Doha Police Authority knew whether she was kidnapped or killed. They couldn't trace her to any location or destination. She just vanished into the empty air. Nevertheless, no one of the non-Muslim world believed the story of Inez's sudden and mysterious disappearance. They collectively believed that the apostate Sudanese girl met the same end the Saudi dissident journalist Jamal Adnan Khashoggi had met after entering his country's consulate in Istanbul. So, many Western groups demanded a thorough search for her remains in the Doha city. They wanted the state of Qatar to face political as well as economic sanctions. The happy family spent a week in the YMCA before the Canadian embassy called them for an interview. During their waiting time, the Abraha family went in sightseeing and visited the famous ivory white marble Taj Mahal mausoleum at Agra City. It was one of the most wonderful time the lovers had ever experienced in life. Their interview was very short and brief. At the interview, Inez and Joseph were told their second request was approved. They had to undergo only medical exams. For some personal considerations, the Canadian embassy had waived the police clearance requirement. After the interview, Joseph and Inez were given closed envelopes for their medical exams. They were told, their immigration medical exams must be conducted by a physician designated by the Canadian embassy. After their medical exams, the Abraha family members were allowed to return to Bombay City and wait for the finalization of their immigration process. Chapter 87. The final day. Inez was the only person who entered inside the belly of a wild beast and came out alive, and her body was immaculate. Therefore, she counted her miracle as more extraordinary and supernatural than that of the prophet Jonah. Jonah remained 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of a whale, but she stayed 33 days and nights inside the bottomless pit of the middle beast and survived and escaped unharmed. Since the day she returned from the middle beast, Inez didn't go out of her apartment except for 2 times. The first time was the day she traveled with her family from Bombay to New Delhi. That was the time the Abraha family went to the UN office and applied for a resettlement to another country. The second time Inaz ventured out of her apartment was the day in which she was flying out of India with her handsome husband Joseph and their lovely daughter Grace. For 1 month, she remained under voluntary house arrest and confined herself within the 4 corners of her apartment at Kalina. No one knew about her miraculous escape from the hotel at the Doha city except her husband and the Alexander family. Even the Bombay Police Authority and her church had no knowledge of her return to India. The first people to know about her return were a few employees of the UN office in New Delhi. None of them had disclosed to the police authority or had leaked to the media such a confidential information. On the day of their departure, Inaz and her husband left their baby daughter with Teresa Alexander and took a rickshaw from Kalina to Santa Cruz and then travelled by the local train to Church Gate. From Church Gate they took a taxi to Colaba. They then spent some time doing shopping in Causeway, Cuff Parade, and Nariman Point. Then they had their last lunch in Bombay at their favourite Arabian cuisine, the Baghdadi restaurant. After enjoying a finger-licking delicious Iraqi meal, the lovers decided to go and sit for the last time at their romantic spot, where their love was born and nourished and cherished. For the heavily persecuted lovers, the place had good memories and sad memory. The last time they sat in that wonderful spot, their intimacy and privacy was violently violated by a deadly terrorist attack. Since that cowardly terrorist attack, the lovers avoided appearing in public. They knew they had many haters who would not hesitate for a second to do them harm whenever they would come near them. It was Inez who once again came up with an idea which Joseph strongly opposed it. She wanted to make a surprise visit to the den of those terrorist students which euphemistically known as the International Students' Hostel. Nevertheless, when his beloved became sulky and refused to talk to him, Joseph bit the bullet and acceded. That day happened to be a Saturday. It was the day the Sudanese Muslim students would come from every nook and corner of the cosmopolitan city of Bombay and gather in their favorite international hostel. Also, that day, the beautiful Joseph was putting on a 2-piece black essential slim-fit suit with stretch and the lovely Inez was dressing up in sexy t-shirt and tied jeans. Her jeans made her extremely attractive and appealing to any male would cast his eyes on her. She was wearing a big golden cross too. For a Sudanese Arab girl to dress up in shirt and trouser was a story unheard of before. And to decorate her neck and highly raised up chest with a cross was something intolerable. Inez didn't dress up purposely to provoke to anger her former fellow citizens. All of them had already counted her among the dead and thanked their God Allah for ridding them of the most evil Sudanese girl ever existed. By then, they considered her to be burning in hellfire for eternity. Therefore, all of them concluded they would never see her face again in this life and the hereafter. She just remained a bad memory in the subconscious of each and every one of them. Once again, that scenario was repeated when the dead and gone female zombie walked inside the hotel cafeteria hand in hand with the beautiful Joseph. This time, however, some of the terrorists who were disguising themselves as foreign students reacted violently. The driving force for their wrath was the big golden cross the infamous Inez was visibly hanging from her neck down to her half-exposed breasts. One bearded Sudanese student lifted his right hand as high as he could without dislocating it from his body and brought it down with full force on Inez's left ear and cheek. His powerful strike was literally airborne Inez's body and caused it to land 2 meters away. Joseph reacted instantly and hit the coward terrorist on his nose. Likewise, the terrorist's body was literally turned upside down and fell on 2 of his Muslim brothers. All 3 anti-social elements went tumbling down like a dump truck emptying its heavy load. The other terrorists screamed in unison, Allahu Akbar, and rushed towards Joseph. They decided to kill him at broad daylight. They all stopped when they saw Joseph's right hand was holding a revolver and pointing it on their faces. If he wasn't armed, the Muslim terrorist students would have killed him with their bare hands and cut his beloved Inez into pieces and then burn their dead bodies with fire. Luckily, Inez overcame the impact of that powerful blow and stood up on her feet. She then requested her husband to ignore those cowards and go with her out of that den of terrorists. Nevertheless, while she was leaving, she heard very dirty insults directed to her by name. She just ignored their colorful words and left with her husband. Some of them began to shout their life threats. They told her that they would never leave her until they would spill her unclean blood on the soil of the accursed Hindus idolaters. However, none of them knew it was supposed to be the last time for them to see the infidel apostate Sudanese girl. If they knew, they might have killed her right there in front of the international students' hostel.